What's going on, everybody? So I just finished playing Resident Evil 4 Separate Ways, and it was everything I wanted it to be. You can't not be excited for a Resident Evil game these days. They seem to get better and better. Even $10 DLCs from Capcom for Resident Evil are shaping up to be better than a lot of single-player games out there. Looking at you, Forspoken. And don't get me wrong, this was easily the best $10 I've ever spent, bringing Resident Evil 4's price to a total of $70 or $45 since it's been on sale for quite some time. But yes, I finally played Separate Ways. After what it seemed like an extremely long wait, all of the Resident Evil 4 fans have finally gotten that missing piece of the story. And just a little heads up if you care, I did play the entire DLC on my ROG Ally, and just like with the Steam Deck, there are some stutters here and there, but playing on the ROG Ally, there was little difference visually with it and a regular PC, since I played at 1080p 60 FPS. But make sure to flick FSR 2.0 to quality mode, and you'll have an amazing time with this DLC. But getting back into the review, with this luxurious and long-awaited DLC, there are a number of new additions, including themes like In the Save Screen, which sounds incredible, new costumes, and just like with Leon's campaign, Ada has sub-missions and sort of side objectives you can complete. And with this DLC, there's just so much good that it makes the original Separate Ways look kind of boring, I'll be honest. The newly remade Separate Ways refreshes everything about the original, adding more weight to Ada's story instead of just filling in some gaps. If there was a time you were wondering, what the heck was Ada doing there? With the remade Separate Ways, you get taken step by step as to why Ada was where she was and what she was doing at the time, and her motive for being there. I mean, Ada even has an interaction with the merchant that Leon notably never did. They sort of have a conversation, a small one, but conversation. This DLC pulls out all the stops and is a spectacle of what made the original so magnetic, with its charming characters and intoxicating world. Separate Ways is a grand display of stealth and action. Expanding from its original counterpart, it mixes all of the elements of Leon's campaign into one unique tale of a rogue operative, Ada Wong. Even though Separate Ways is broken up into chapters, everything about the remake story feels cohesive, continuous, and walks you through Leon's hell through the eyes of Ada, who's behind the curtains. It's brilliant and shows deep talent with Capcom's Dev 1 team. This DLC also adds what the original Resident Evil didn't have. And yes, that is some Hookman. A lot of people know about Resident Evil 4, codename Hookman, and the fact that Leon, in this sort of beta version of Resident Evil 4, it focused more on horror and hallucinations. Because Leon was supposed to be infected, yes, just like the original game, but in the beta version of Resident Evil 4, Leon was supposed to be infected, but not only that, he was supposed to be seeing some crazy shit. And in Separate Ways, Ada gets infected, spoilers ahead by the way, by one of the Verdugo clones or twins, and she hallucinates throughout parts of the story, making her see a kind of pursuer. Not a Hookman, but he does have some kind of bioorganic sword. So there is a weapon there that resembles the original Hookman from the beta. And it's just awesome that it's the second Verdugo. It's surprising to see it in this form, and I'm more than happy Capcom decided to hold off on certain parts of the original Resident Evil 4 to make the Separate Ways storyline feel even fresher and more impactful. And it's ingenious. There are, not surprisingly, entirely brand new locations added to the main story in this DLC. And new story beats that reveal a lot more of what was going on behind the scenes. And if there's one thing I noticed in this remade Separate Ways, and opposed to the main campaign, it's the emphasis on stealth. And the opening and timing of Ada's arrival makes a lot of sense given it's been somewhat implied Ada was the one to liberate Louis from the start in the remake. So the fact that she was cloaked in shadows and sort of just appearing out of nowhere gives remake Ada more of an actual spy kind of feel. And the fact that this DLC focuses on stealth adds to that overall portrayal. And yes, Ada does save Louis in this DLC, and they show it, and it's awesome. And that also makes sense because Louis was acting like he owed her a debt, not only because he's scared of whoever she works with, but the fact that she saved his ass. And speaking of connections, Wesker has been keeping tabs on Ada the entire time, time, and that missing clash between Krauser and Ada has been replaced by Wesker and Ada, and I'll freaking take it. And speaking of which, Ada's relationship with Wesker is insane. Wesker doesn't trust her as far as he can throw her. Well, actually, that's not the best choice of words, but Wesker is paying close attention to the Amber and Ada's mission. He doesn't want to make it known that he's there. But the more trouble Ada runs into, Wesker starts showing his face more and expressing his distrust to Ada. And I thought that was an awesome dynamic and made a lot of sense between Ada and Wesker. The fact that at the end he even threatens her and she threatens him right back. And Wesker actually acknowledges the fact that Ada is extremely skilled and there is a chance that she could kill Wesker if she wanted to. And that's probably true. She has killed giant monsters after all, just like Chris Redfield. But this DLC is an express train through Resident Evil 4, and there's so much to take in. If this DLC is your first experience with the game, it may be too much. Most likely, anybody who's playing the DLC would have played the main campaign, but sometimes people like to dive into the DLC first. So if you're going into the DLC first, it's probably not a good idea because Separate Ways starts off in an insane way. Just like Resident Evil 4, but after that initial intro with Resident Evil 4, the game starts to slow down and the pacing gets a lot slower. But nothing ever simmers down in this DLC. It's all intense almost all the time. The developers seem to think of everything. Some of the set pieces are so impressive. If they were included with the original game, I would have been okay with it. The Pursuer Big Cheese situation with Ada was kind of terrifying and awesome and extremely well done. If Resident Evil 4 Remake wasn't already one of the greatest games of all time, this DLC elevated it to be probably one of the best games of all time. And that's counting Resident Evil 2 Remake, even though that one is still my personal favorite. And oh my god, we finally get to find out what the fuck happened to Leon's jacket and who took it. We finally get to look the guy in the eye who took Leon's jacket and take it back. 10 out of 10 just for that. But I have a review to make, so I guess I gotta say more. And yes, Ada has another secret weapon time. She legitimately has a detective mode in this game, and it's fancier than ever, pointing out footprints, fingerprints, goals, and it doesn't stop there. She goes full on Batman with all this detective vision stuff. And as for Ada's combat, this girl can straight up grapnel hook like the Dark Knight himself, along with a bat claw kick to instantly launch herself to enemies that are some feet away from her. And while grappling, if there's an enemy on the other side, she can do a straight up grapnel takedown. Pulling off all the stops doesn't quite describe this DLC efficiently enough. The El Gigante boss fight during the first few chapters in the village sort of makes Leon's boss battle with El Gigante pale in comparison. It's also as if this was the true El Gigante boss battle the developers wanted to make in the remake, but were too afraid to change too much. And this shows that Dev Team 1 has some insane ideas they could have added to change up Resident Evil 4 Remake, and I think the game would have benefited from it. But now they have the opportunity to remake a subpar extra story in the original Resident Evil 4, and it seems they decided to put their own creative spin on nearly every meh and okay part of Resident Evil 4 and Separate Ways. This DLC feels more like the climax to Resident Evil 4 Remake instead of an extra story. The fact that you can get all of this with just a $10 DLC shows that it's not because they sold a lot, but it's because this DLC is Resident Evil 4 fans' inheritance. You did not earn this DLC. We did not pay for this DLC. This DLC is our inheritance, and it is our entitlement to the original game and our loyalty to it that got us this incredible DLC. Because Separate Ways wasn't even original content for the game. A lot of people say it was original content supposed to be there from day one. With the original GameCube version, it only included Assignment Ada, which was a kind of hard mode to the island level in Resident Evil 4. With the original Resident Evil 4's PlayStation 2 port, you basically needed to buy an entirely new port and different system, if you didn't already own a PlayStation 2, just to play the Separate Ways storyline. And it was also included with the Wii port. So pick your poison. You either buy an entirely new console or you pay an extra $10. Compared to that, we're basically getting this DLC for free. And it is 5 to 6 hours of insanity. But let's get to the not so great thing. Ada's voice actor, Lily Gao, is sort of not an excuse, but it seems the reason she sounds like that is because she's so dang tired and also infected during the story. They make it clear that she's just dealing with a lot of pressure from Wesker and the fact Leon is there and that's the first time she's seen seen him in 6 years. And also she's infected throughout most of the story. But that's not really a good excuse for the voice actor and the kind of job she did in this. To me, the voice actor just isn't skilled enough to catch all the beats and micro expressions the original voice actor portrayed. The subtle playfulness in her voice doesn't seem to be entirely there this time around. Though overall Lily Gao seemed to have picked up a few tricks from the original campaign to now. Her performance is better, but not much of an improvement, in my opinion. Every time she speaks, it sort of takes me out of the experience, and Capcom could have picked better. With that said, I'm alright with the voice actor for this game specifically. Since the game is so dang amazing, I'll let it slide. Just this once. Let's just hope Capcom drops her ASAP for someone better. She's just not meant to be a voice actor. Sorry, Lily. But I hope she gets better, and maybe one day comes back with even more talent. We can always get better. So I have hope for this voice actor, but for now, maybe they should go somewhere else. Maybe they should go separate ways. I'll stop. And speaking of performance, Luis, or Andre Pena, killed it. Luis is yet again one of the best characters in this campaign and gets even more time to shine. More time with Luis is always a plus, and it makes this DLC that much more special to me. Luis doesn't only signify the heart of Resident Evil 4 Remake, he encapsulates the real mission in the story to save Leon and Ashley and get rid of the infection. And that's exactly what you help Luis do in this story. Smaller things were added that were amiss in Leon's campaign, like the drill and gate scene with Ashley. Though Ada is the only one in danger this time around, it's good to see even the smallest details were added, though there were parts that are still missing from Separate Ways in general. But to be honest, all of the missing pieces in this Separate Ways remake don't matter as much as the overall experience. And speaking of missing pieces, yes, U3 is in this DLC, and not how most people would expect. I was surprised to find out it was one of the Verdugos that eventually mutated into U3, though I would have personally preferred U3 being its own thing. I also think making it a pursuer type and a last transformation is a clever idea, and once again, simultaneously dodging expectations and giving everybody what they want at the same time. Dev Team 1 just doesn't know how to limit themselves, and that's a good thing. The U3 boss battle itself, in my opinion, wasn't better than the original though. There were 2 basic arenas to run around, and there weren't any obstacles or switches to flip or places to navigate through like in the original U3 boss battle. And U3 this time around was definitely more of a bullet sponge. I had a ton of ammo, and by the end of the boss battle, I was left with almost nothing. U3 is fast, and he could take a lot of bullets. And honestly, if I'm thinking realistically, it seemed like they added the boss battle last minute, which is a little disappointing. Adding some Navistadors in there to keep us busy while fighting U3 seemed kind of like a last minute sort of idea. But the boss battle was fine, doesn't really add anything to the DLC, doesn't take away from it at all. I would have liked some platforms falling though, that would have been nice to see how they would have done that, but that's a lot more work than they had panned out for themselves, so I get they had to rush through the U3 fight, but show the U3 fight a little love. There are some people out there that actually really like that boss battle like me and find it terrifying. And pretty much after that U3 fight, the DLC kind of ramps up to a very high speed and seems a bit rushed. And since they did cut the U3 fight in half, there is another unknown test subject that you run into, which is a new kind of mutated monster. And that monster is kind of scary, but he also looks like a big shark face guy, which kind of looks awesome. But yeah, that's another boss battle that kind of terrified me a little bit. And it sort of made up for the U3's lack of uniqueness to the boss battle, which was in the original game. But that uniqueness was taken to a new, different type of boss. So like I said, it doesn't ruin the overall experience, and even though the game felt slightly sped up or rushed, there's still so much content and so much love put into this DLC. And to add another important missing piece to this remake, it's the laser room. In my opinion, it was better than the original laser room, and there was a little tribute to those Paul W.S. Anderson movies that I used to love as a kid, with the monster dying to the lasers and not the main character. I love that tribute so much to the laser room, and the presentation was incredibly well done too. It looked great with the RE engine. The laser room was perfect. And there was so much added to Separate Ways, with all new locations and smooth set piece to set piece pacing. Separate Ways gives the fans, or just me specifically, everything I wanted to see from an Ada storyline. It sort of felt exactly like Resident Evil 6's Ada storyline, but a lot better. And it's just insane to me that they even included some missing pieces from Leon's original story concept in Resident Evil 4. It's definitely a fantastic experience. Though at the end, I would have liked if instead of fighting Sadler a second time, maybe fight Krauser instead. Like if Leon is too busy fighting Sadler, so Ada had to defend Leon against Krauser while he tries to assassinate him a second time. And it would have just been awesome to fight Krauser a second time to see if he mutated even a little more. But the Krauser fight just never happens. And that's one of the major missing pieces in Separate Ways that I was kind of disappointed to discover would never happen. Because I feel like Ada more than ever has a reason to kill Krauser, specifically because he kills Luis. It just doesn't make any sense to not add that Krauser boss battle in Separate Ways, given the connection with Luis, Krauser, Ada, and Leon. Ada has every reason to kill Krauser, but I guess he's just officially dead in the story and he's not coming back. It would have been pretty awesome if he had a second mutation. But let's just assume that Shark Face was Krauser's second mutation. But all in all, I understand why it wasn't put in. It's mainly because Krauser and Ada just aren't supposed to meet. It seems like the developers just didn't want them to talk at all. She says his name a few times and that's about it. They never acknowledge each other, never fight. In this remake, just never meet. And that's unfortunate to me. It seemed like a missed opportunity, but the story and set pieces were overall amazing. I still absolutely loved the remake of Separate Ways. And to top it off, Mercenaries now has Ada, her variant, Wesker, and a Leon variant. And first of all, Wesker is a complete monster. His mayhem mode was taken right out of Resident Evil 5. You could just teleport everywhere and punch everybody in the face, kick them in the face, every kind of thing. Just teleport around like Wesker should. And I actually liked the vibe of Wesker in Separate Ways. I thought he was kind of intimidating, mysterious, impatient, and generally a narcissist. And that's Wesker. He definitely felt like modern Wesker should. But as for the future of Resident Evil, we all know Capcom loves the money, so a Resident Evil 5 remake is inevitable and is most likely in production already. But I hope for once Capcom sits back and realizes maybe they should just take it easy and remake Code Veronica. Remake something that those die-hard fans that used to collect all the strategy guides, all the toys, all the comics, every single iteration of the games, and the fact that they just want a Code Veronica remake. In my entire life on my Resident Evil collection, I completely love Resident Evil Code Veronica. I had the soundtrack, the comic books, you know, those little graphic novels. I love every Resident Evil equally, but Code Veronica has a special place because that was the first Resident Evil that I've ever owned. So I really hope Capcom just sits back and just thinks that Code Veronica is worth remaking. And there are a lot of aspects of that game that just aren't that great in a modern game that should be remade. If there's any Resident Evil that deserves a remake, because it's kind of flawed, it is Resident Evil Code Veronica. And I just want to see modern Claire work with modern Chris Redfield, whoever the heck modern Chris Redfield is at this time, in a solid remake of one of my favorite classic Resident Evil games. But that's enough begging. I'm just saying, I hope Capcom just gives it a little thought instead of paying attention to the money. You got enough money, Capcom. And if there were any final words that were suiting to leave you all with one last piece of evidence to prove this DLC is incredible, this $10 DLC alone, in my opinion, is better than the entirety of Resident Evil 3 Remake. Separate Ways is more polished and well-rounded than Resident Evil 3 Remake in almost every single way, since it already has the foundation of one of the greatest games of all time and an original story with its own merits. Separate Ways is perfect and easily destroys the original side story from Resident Evil 4 2005. I give the Separate Ways remake a 10 out of 10. Easily one of the best DLCs I've ever played in my entire life. And would you look at that, we didn't need an open world or a $70 price tag to do it. Well, actually, at this point, Resident Evil Remake would be $70, but the DLC's $10, and that alone was like 5 hours. It is such a long DLC to complete in one sitting, but it is extremely well done. And I played the entirety of it on my ROG Ally. It looked just like the original game should, and played mostly just how the original game should, because on Windows there is some stuttering with this game. So if you're playing on your Steam Deck, ROG Ally, or gaming PC, just know that Separate Ways is very well optimized, and I had an amazing time with it. But yeah, what did you guys think about Separate Ways? This little $10 DLC blew my mind. But let me know what you thought in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a good one. Later.